Hey everybody, it's Lee. It is Monday, March 20th, and we've got the camera set up because I did some more promotional videos. So it's another very attractive daily briefing. So today was a really weird news day. I'm going to talk about some of it though. I had a big 3,400 word piece that my son Shane helped me tremendously with that was published at Breitbart News today. Today was the day of the House Intelligence hearings that Congressman Devin Nunes hosted. Adam Schiff spoke, the Democrat. It was bonkers. I don't know how else to put it. I was very unhappy with both Nunes and Schiff, in my opinion, was completely off the rails. But we got the story up and published, and it was a big story. I want to talk a little bit. We'll link to the story below. I want to talk a little bit about writing a big story like that and some of the structural things I did in that story, okay? I want you to look at this from a writer's perspective. So I knew this was going to be a big story, and I knew we were laying out a relatively complex narrative that a lot of people aren't talking about. It's out of the news cycle. So I wanted to make sure that we laid it out in a way that was simple for people to understand. And structurally, basically the story's in two parts. There's a multi-paragraph introduction that lays out the basics of the story, but does not go into detail. Then there's a long section on the details of the story. And the structural device that I chose for that was to lay it out chronologically, okay? So in public speaking, the rule is tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Okay, it's an old saw in public speaking. In other words, lay out what you're going to say. Psychologically, that prepares people for material. Then give the material, and then repeat it to help put it into the listener's mind. So I apply that all the time in my writing. This is a good way to think about writing. So the first thing was I'd done a lot of research to know the material. I'm going to talk about one other aspect of this that I did, which is I started yapping about this story while I was reading it on social media. Now, I do this sometimes. It's called live writing, where literally as I was writing the story, I was posting it to social media. And let me explain why I do that before I go. I'm going to go back to the structure thing in a second. But the reason I do that is often when I'm thinking through a story and I'm trying to explain it, I like to have an audience. And this is what was so awesome about working with Shane on it, because I could go back and forth with him about the story, and he knew the material very well. I was basically taking a number of different stories that existed already and was connecting the dots and saying, look, here's what happened. And it starts in June of 2016, and it goes up to today, I guess, really, because I was talking about the hearings a little bit. So the reason I like to talk about stories sometimes on social media is it helps me think through them. And there's another advantage. Because I was talking about it on social media, somebody on social media saw what I was talking about and gave me a detail that I actually didn't know. Specifically, read the whole story and this will make more sense. In early January, it was reported that Comey, the DNC said that James Comey had not asked to see the DNC servers. So I tweeted that. And then somebody else pointed out that he'd actually contradicted that and said, yes, he had asked to see the DNC servers. That was a big detail, and I didn't know it. And I'd been studying the story a lot, but I just didn't know it. And the reason I got that detail in the story is because I was talking about it on social media. So this is a technique that I use sometimes. Sometimes you want stories to be a surprise, sometimes you don't. So that's just something to think about, just something I'm putting in your head. Now, structurally, what I did was I laid out the basics of the story, and you can see it. The first 3-4 paragraphs, I say, and I had to really think about those sentences, that I had to lay out who's in the story. So, CrowdStrike, a group that was hired by the DNC, a cybersecurity firm, issued a report that was later discredited. But even after that, James Comey praised this group. That was basically the first paragraph. And it's easy to say, but it was hard to get to. I had to really think about, like, what's the essence of this story without getting into the weeds at all. So the first few paragraphs kind of repeat that stuff. Is it a setup? It's a setup. And then I go through chronologically. This happened on this date, and this person said this. Then this happened on this date, and this person said this. And that makes it easy to go through. Now, chronologically is not the only way to tell a story. You could do it topically. You could do it by subject matter, right? You could do it by geographical location. It wouldn't have made any sense in this story, but that's another way to tell the story. First, we were in London, but meanwhile, over in Washington, D.C., this happened, et cetera, right? So you've got different structural devices you can use as a writer. I want you to think about those. When you sit down to write a story, ask yourself, should I tell this chronologically, by subject matter? And be aware of that when you're reading other people's stories. Be aware of that. That's another thing to look for. How are they telling the story? Did they do a good job? Is it clear? Clarity is what I was going for here, and that's it. So anyway, hopefully this gives you something to think about as a writer. As always, your feedback is welcome. And until next time, I'm Lee. Thanks for listening to today's Daily Briefing.